Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 82. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we are going to be going over a stall dondozo team. Now obviously at the start of Dozo week we had the cursed dondozo team, which was kind of a stall dozo team. It took a long time basically, and it did damage over time, which is the whole point of stall. But more so this time, Dondozo is going to be the one sitting on the field and not really contributing any damage to the fight. We just want Dondozo to sit on the field for a long time, while our other Pokemon have already set up either the method of the other Pokemon dying, or have gotten rid of enough Pokemon that Dondozo is able to succeed. So starting off with our Dondozo, this is going to be a first that we've used this move at all in the 128 teams challenge, and I'd be willing to bet it's probably the last time we're going to see it in the 128 teams challenge, and that is Dive. And we're using Dive because it is a strong water type move, but the main downside of Dive is that it takes 2 turns in order to hit. However, in our stall Dondozo strategy, Dive is actually a benefit because it will give us a pseudo immunity turn, meaning that we basically have 1 turn of doing damage and 2 turns of having a protect, because every Pokemon that is faster than Dondozo will not be able to hit Dondozo on the second turn of Dive unless they're like a guaranteed accuracy Pokemon like Flower Trick, and every Pokemon that is slower than Dondozo will not be able to hit Dondozo on the first turn of Dive. And even if the opponent decides to protect into the Dive on the second turn, that's hopefully still a lot of turns that the opponent is taking damage and we are recovering health using our leftovers. As well as Dondozo just also has the option to go for the body press. Since our strategy is a bit weak into steel types, it's nice to have the body press to do some consistent fighting type damage, and we don't have to invest anything into our attack if we don't want to, because we can use our defense stat for body press. As well as Dondozo also has the rest, for if the opponent is managing to do more damage to you, then you're healing off with your leftovers over the course of the protect and the dive turns. We can go for rest, and then we'll get full health, and then we'll wake up in 2 turns, and then out of the 2 turns we can click protect, and then dive, and then just keep going with the strategy. And of course, we're unaware on Dondozo because we don't want any Pokemon setting up on Dondozo in front of it in the turns that we're spamming our dives and our protects. And we're Terra Fairy just because Fairy is only weak to Steel, which we can kind of cover with the body press. But we're also weak to Poison, which we have a good number of stuff to deal with Poison types on this team at least. Next up, we got our Tatsugiri, and this Tatsugiri is mostly a support Tatsugiri, as we have the Muddy Water perhaps for some accuracy drops against the opponent to stall out some more turns for us, but you also have the Taunt for getting the opponent to stop using status moves that maybe they're using to heal themselves in order to get out of the stall that we're going on with, and we also have the Helping Hand just to boost the damage on the Pokemon next to Tatsugiri, and the Protect to stall turns the same way as Dondozo, and we're Mago Berry just because whenever Tatsugiri gets low, we can get a bunch of health back with the Mago Berry, and we're Terra Flying so that maybe we can dodge a ground type move. It's not really that important to have a good Terra on Tatsugiri here. Next up, we got our main stall component, and that is going to be the Glimmora, who is hopefully going to be mortal spinning the opponent with its Choice Scarf super fast in order to poison the 2 Pokemon that are on the field, and then if they use a physical attack into Glimmora, it will activate Toxic Debris in order to also poison the Pokemon that are in the back of the field. And we also have the Sludge Wave on Glimmora for just doing some spread poison type damage into maybe some grass types that the opponent brings in order to counter the Dondozo. As well as we have the Power Gem on Glimmora for just good general stab rock type damage, but also to hit the flying types that won't be taking the entry hazard poison from the Toxic Debris. As well as we are Terra Ground Earth Power on Glimmora in order to catch off ground the Steel and Poison types that can counter the Glimmora's stall. We're going to hopefully be doing a lot of damage to them with our ground type moves, and we do have a couple of Helping Hands on the team for Glamora to knock out those Pokemon. Next up we got Tropius, and Tropius is a pretty nice stall component as it has the Harvest ability, which means that we have a 50% chance each turn to get our berry back at the end of turn, and then it's guaranteed sun, but we don't have any sun on this team, so we can just keep spamming our citrus berries whenever we're getting closer to low health. And if the opponent doesn't have a great way to overpower Tropius, then Tropius just gets to sit on the field for a while the opponent is hopefully taking the Leech Seed damage, because we can restore more health that way. And Tropius isn't specifically fast, but the flying type damage is kind of nice for chipping the opponent as well. And maybe if the opponent is trying to set up Trick Room, then maybe we can have Tropius be slower than the opponent's Pokemon inside of Trick Room if they have some non-Trick Room pieces. I don't think it's necessarily worth making Tropius min speed in order to have the Air Slash possibly flinch things inside of Trick Room, as there are some Pokemon that Tropius can outspeed with its 71 speed, like Amoonguss for example. Also on Tropius, we have the Wide Guard option in order to make it so that none of our team is getting hit by spread attacks, which is good because Glamora and Goldango obviously suffer from being hit by the Earthquake, or the Make It Rain for Glamora, or the Heat Wave for Goldango, so it's nice to have Tropius who can prevent all of those moves with the Wide Guard. And we have the Dragon Tail slotted on Tropius so that we can either choose to force a Pokemon out, which means that they will end up taking Glamora's Toxic Spikes hopefully, or we can side Dragon Tail into one of our own Pokemon, say Glamora, in order to activate Glamora's Toxic Spikes, and then we are able to reset the Choice Scarf once Glamora leaves the field. Or if Goldango goes for the Make It Rain, we can also side Dragon Tail into Goldango in order to bring out one of our other Pokemon, maybe if it's Dondozo or Tatsugiri, and then swap out Tropius for the other one on the next turn in order to form the full Dozo mode. As well as we are also Terra Water on Tropius, just because water has a lot of good resistances, and namely ice is the big one since we were previously quad weak to it. We just have to kind of hope that the opponent doesn't have Freeze Dry for Tropius. Next up we got Goldango, and this is just going to be a heavy hitter Goldango, as we have the signature Make It Rain to do our spread steel type damage, and we have the Shadow Ball, which is just good stab single target damage, and the Thunderbolt in order to get some opposing water type Pokemon or flying type Pokemon, and the Dazzling Gleam in order to maybe try and hit dragons is nice. And I went with Terra Steel on Goldango, but I don't think Steel is the best one. You might want a defensive Terra on Goldango, but I'm just leaving it as Steel for now, as the Steel Make It Rain still is valuable. I'm just not sure if it's as valuable as a good defensive Terra on Goldango here. And last but not least, we got ourselves a Diglett here, and even running Dugtrio is a little bit questionable, so you might be wondering why we have Diglett, especially a Diglett with basically no EVs here. And that is because we are going to be using Diglett, of course, for the Arena Trap, same reason that you would use Dugtrio. However, our Diglett is going to be an Endeavor Diglett, so hopefully what happens is that Diglett gets brought down to its Focus Sash, and then it can start pressuring Endeavor into the opposing Pokemons, like our Caledon, who wants to build a bunch of defense boost. If Diglett gets brought down to its Focus Sash, and then we click Endeavor into our Caledon is now one hit away from death. And this is especially nice whenever we have the poison with Glamora set up, as if you Endeavor a Pokemon that's already been poisoned, then it's guaranteed to die at the end of the turn unless it has like leftovers, grassy terrain, Aqua Ring, something crazy like that. But also on Diglett we have the Foul Play, and we're Terra Dark mostly to avoid Prankster moves, but the Terra Dark boosted Foul Play is another way to do some decent damage with Diglett, and we can use the Diglett's side Foul Play into Glamora in order to activate our own Toxic Spikes, as the Foul Play shouldn't do a lot of damage to Glamora as it's a special attacker that is trained so. And Diglett's got the Helping Hand for boosting either the damage that Glamora or Goldango do into the opponent when we're trying to wipe out like one crucial piece that they have for the Dondozo Tatsugiri mode. Also, another mode that we have is that if Glamora goes for the Sludge Wave, of course Tropius can block it, Goldango is immune to it, and Diglett can afford to get hit by it in order to proc our Focus Sash to allow us to immediately Endeavor into the opponent, but we can also Helping Hand into Glamora for the Sludge Wave, and then click the Endeavor on turn 2 if the opponent allows us to. But yeah, that's the basic gist of the team. Let's get into some battles. Alright, so first up we have a pretty tough Lilycold team where they just have pretty much the basic Trick Room option in order to support their Lilycold team here. Nothing too crazy, ideally. So the opponent leads Lilligant and Torkoal, and I really like this lead for us because we led Glamora and Tropius here, and I predicted they were immediately going to after you Torkoal, so we wide guard with Tropius, and they do in fact do that, and the Eruption does not catch either of our Pokemon here, damaging Tropius at all, and Tropius gets to dodge the Sludge Wave, which brings Lilligant down to its sash and does enough damage to 2-hit KO the Torkoal. Torkoal protects here, but I figured that they would either try to Sleep Powder into Glamora, or they basically weren't going to after you the Torkoal on this turn unless they really wanted the throw. But instead of going for the Sleep Powder, they actually go for the Close Combat into Glamora, which means that we get our Toxic Spikes, and unfortunately Tropius takes the Sludge Wave damage there, but Tropius is also barely able to take the 2-ko there as we get our berry activated, and since the opponent has the Sun up, we're going to get the berry back at the end of the turn. So they've only really done 25% damage, or we've only done 25% damage to ourselves on the Tropius here, as we've gotten to take the Lilligant, and there's the Harvest as I mentioned before, but now the opponent gets in DD, and I feel perfectly fine just going for the Sludge Wave since the Torkoal protected on the previous turn, but actually Hatterene comes in here, which is pretty okay for us as we get good Poison type damage into it. Tropius eats its berry yet again, and we Leech Seed the Indeedee in order to start stalling us out. But unless the Hatterene has the Mystical Fire here in order to hit something like Tropius or perhaps Shadow Ball in its arsenal, it probably has only the Expanding Force and Dazzling Gleam to really do good damage, and if it did have the Mystical Fire, it's probably not taking out Glamora here. So we can afford to just go for the wide guard with Tropius here again, and they do reveal the Expanding Force with Hatterene, which we get to block, and we get to click the Sludge Wave again into the opponent, which takes out their Hatterene, and Indeedee dies at the end of the turn, and the opponent decides to give up, seeing as they only have a Torkoal left, who I think we had Dozo mode in the back at this point. There's no way that the Torkoal can beat Dozo mode unless they're like Clear Smog and then they manage to like super crit Eruption. I don't think they have a way out of this one. Next up, we've got what looks to be a Mouse Ape team, as they also have the Whimsicott for the Tailwind, and Blood Moon, Ursaluna, and Goldango are just very heavy damage pieces, and of course Fiji Sea Cat is here to ruin our fun as always. So we lead Dondozo and Glamora here, as I figure we can either pressure the Dondozo mode and we can have Glamora hopefully try to attack into Whimsicott is the Pokemon that I wanted to see in the lead, but if it wasn't Whimsicott, then and they led like Mousehold or something, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. It would just get kind of difficult quickly because they could just side pop bomb for the Rage Fist into Annihilate. But thankfully that universe does not play out, and we just protect Dozo on this turn, and they fake out Dozo instead, probably not wanting to proc the Glamora's Toxic Debris there, as Whimsicott reveals it is the Sash, and we swap a Goldango here, as I want to bait the Whimsicott into perhaps throwing the Encore into Goldango, which they end up doing, so we get to take Whimsicott pretty much for free there, and they do knock off into Glamora here, getting rid of our Scarf, but it means we also get out Toxic Debris for the Annihilate here, so the end game into Annihilate is looking really good. I Terra Steeled here because I wanted to try and get off a bunch of Make It Rain, but the Incineroar gets the call here to just go for the Flare Blitz into Goldango to take us out, which is a little unfortunate, but the Annihilate's Rage Fist has not been procced yet by anything, and it seems unlikely that the opponent will proc it themselves. So they only have the option to really go for Drain Punch right now, as long as we don't hit the Annihilate, and they are slowly taking the poison damage. They do have leftovers on their monkey, but the poison is doing more than their leftovers. So we just take the Incineroar on this turn, and they reveal that they have the bear in the back, and now we can start using our strategy of really just stalling them out, as they're trying to Drain Punch into Dondozo, but they won't get very much health back even if they manage to do that. And with the Protect turns, the Ursaluna is still not able to hit Dozo yet, and Ursaluna is slower than Dondozo, so they go for the Blood Moon, but unfortunately Dondozo is not able to be hit by it while we're in the turn of Dive, and they double protect out the Dive, which is perfectly fine for them to do, but they are taking poison damage, and we're back at full health with Dondozo now. So I could have probably afforded to go for the Body Press into Ursaluna there, since they've already used the Terra with the Annihilate in order to save themselves from one hit from the Goldango, I think. But we do Body Press on this turn because we want the most poison damage that we can get on the Ursaluna, just in case it didn't die to the Body Press for some strange reason. We're currently in a protect war with the Annihilate that the Annihilate is only losing as we continue to just protect stall the Annihilate to bring it as low as possible, as we want to take it out in one hit to avoid it getting a more powerful Rage Fist, and with the body press we can definitely afford to do that there. And lastly, we have a pretty standard Archaludon Rain team here, where they don't have things like the Basque Legion. They have the Goldango instead for dealing their ghost type damage, and they do have the Mouse Hold for the side population bomb into Archaludon, and Incineroar and Rillaboom are just great supports in general. Well, we lead Glimmora and Diglett here in order to perhaps do some Diglety things, and we just Helping Hand into Glimmora, and we get the Earth Power into Archaludon, and Archaludon actually just flat out gets knocked out by it, which is great for us. As they tried to side population bomb, but the Archaludon unfortunately got the hit there, and we protect Diglett because I don't want Diglett to lose this focus sash, even though they have Mousehold on the field who can just population bomb as they try to population bomb, and Diglett is obviously the threat as the opponent decided to double it, but we get the Helping Hand in Glimmora in order to do some more damage into Incineroar, and they decide to population bomb into Glimmora here, which is going to take some time because they're not only population bombing, but they're also getting up their toxic or our toxic spikes onto them is what they're getting up here, and Flare Blitz comes out for an Incineroar, but it doesn't KO Incineroar, and it also doesn't KO Glimmora, so now we get to pick them off with the Earth Power, and they do just decide to population bomb into Diglett, which is perfectly okay. Diglett wasn't doing much at this point, as it's pretty much already done its job, and now they bring in Pelipper, and I want to reset what I have on the Glimmora, perhaps for later, to Power Gem into Pelipper, just in case. So we form the full Dondozo mode, and depending on how many crits here they get on population bomb, they might do some damage to Dozo. There's one crit. I think if I remember correctly, they actually crit Dozo 3 times in 10 population bombs, and this Weather Ball also crits Dondozo, which is, I mean, I guess it's fine. We get to body press into Mousehold, and that takes it out of the game, and Pelipper has to crit us a lot more times with that Weather Ball in order to take us out of the game, because Pelipper doesn't have a way to get rid of our leftovers, and we can afford to just dive stall the Pelipper, as the Pelipper Weather Balls into Tatsugiri, perhaps understanding that the game is over at this point, and it really doesn't want to try and play out the end game. We're protect stalling them also so that we are running out the Pelipper's weather, even though we could have KO'd them on the next dive. It's much better to stall out the Pelipper's weather in order to make it so that either misses the Hurricane or it can't do the damage boost with its Weather Ball anymore, and the opponent sees the writing on the wall and just decides to give up. So yeah, that was the stall Dozo team. I do actually think that there is something here with the dive that's worth exploring a little bit more. I'm just not sure if we have the greatest stall pieces on this team, because Garganacl stall is also a thing, but if you're running Glimmora and Garganacl, then you're running 2 rock types, and Goldango is already here, so we're already kind of weak to ground, which is kind of why we have Tropius, in order to avoid ground moves, and it's like a whole thing. But it is definitely funny that this is like one of the only competitive uses for dive is just stalling turns with dive on Dondozo, who's already super tanky. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like on the video, and even consider subscribing, because both of those things would help me out an absolute ton. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you.